Today I just wrapped up a couple things for summer maintenance on my young fruit tree here, and I've got 3 tips, a couple bits of advice that are pretty important for having a young tree really thrive in the years ahead with fruit, with health, the right shape, and getting this thing off to a good start. So this particular tree I planted last late winter, early spring, and it was a bare root tree. It's a cosmic Honeycrisp apple tree. There's some other videos you can check out about that, but today's video we're going to walk through. I'll show you some samples on here, and hopefully this is helpful. If you have a young fruit tree, apple tree, pear tree, that sort of thing, that is maybe a year old, 2 years, or even 3 years old, depending on how big it was when you bought it, maybe it's bare root or something, there are 3 tips in the later summer that you want to keep in mind to keep this tree off to a great start. So again, this is the Cosmic Crisp tree. If you saw some of my videos from back in the spring or late winter, this is a tree I had gotten. I was pretty excited about getting it, and I've got plans to see this thing not only just grow wonderful Cosmic Crisp apples, but I'm going to be grafting on different apples throughout the years. I already started right away. I put a Honeycrisp apple limb in, and I'll show you this. That's where this pink ribbon comes from. This is the Honeycrisp limb that was successful, and my goal is next winter, at the end of winter, to graft on a couple other varieties and just see what happens to this tree. So that'll be for another video, but there's 3 tips that will keep a young tree like this, whether it's apple, pear, or other things, healthy and off to a great start. The first one is called tipping. So the first tip is called tipping, and let me take you in close and show you a couple things about this. Tipping is basically where you take some of the new growth and you basically just cut off the tip, and that might be at the very top, or you might go back a little farther, a little closer to where the old growth was. But tipping does a couple things. Tipping will first off cause new growth, so you're going to see new limbs begin to shoot out, and the buds will break and cause just a bunch of new growth right around the end of that. So it'll encourage growth in a direction perhaps that you want. Create some more branches, some side branches. Tipping also strengthens the current limb that was there. So when you have a lot of new young growth, that first year growth, it's typically pretty thin, and with that being thin, those branches are not going to be strong to support a lot of weight, and so a lot of times you will tip it back to cause the existing wood, so whether it's the old growth or a little bit of that new year's growth, to strengthen, to thicken up, and let it grow a little slower. So here's a good example. I tipped it right, you can't really, this leaf's in the way, but right there, as you can see where it's brown wood, and then it goes to that new light green. And so I cut it right there. I had a leaf node that was there, and I cut it right above the leaf node, and it's shot up. It'll also possibly create some fruit buds below that. So typically when you tip a branch like this, you can encourage fruit buds to also kick out. Here's another example. So you can see the brown growth in there. That's the old growth. That's year number 1. And then after I tipped it, you got this light green new growth. And now right now they're pretty close together. I'm not going to worry about pruning that until some future time, but it's going to be kicking out a couple. So there's 3 new buds that shot out limbs, little mini branches that are going to be kicking out. All right, so for tipping, I've got this nice young branch, not super thick yet. It's just slightly under a pencil thick. Maybe it's pencil thick at the very bottom. And I really want this thing getting some good strength. This is going to be one of my main leaders down the road, and I want this thing getting some good strength. I could tip it up here at the top, and that would cause new growth like you saw in some of those other parts, but I really want this branch to strengthen, so I'm actually going to go lower and just encourage some new growth there. You can see right above a bud, just tip that, and that's going to cause those bottom 3 to kick out some new branches and also thicken up that wood. Here's another example. Got a young branch, and in this case I'm going to tip it towards the top. So the second tip is going to be what I call separating. That's where you take you can take a plastic pipe, you can take a thin piece of wood, and you're basically causing, you're pushing some of these branches for a month or 2 months. You're putting this board in there to kind of like what I have right here, where it's causing the branch to want to grow more at an angle out. This is a good healthy, like this is my Honeycrisp limb. I know I'm going to want to keep this, but I want to continue to encourage this thing to shoot out and not up. And so I would go and take a piece of wood and just find a nice spot where it'll rest. Set that in there. It's not super tight. and over time this thing will begin to accept that angle. It might come in just a hair, but it'll kind of create that bowl effect that I'm looking for. So you don't have to do this a lot, but if you notice you have a good healthy branch that you're going to want to keep in the right place, but it might be going up a little bit high, you can put that separating piece of wood in there, and that will encourage the things. So you can see here, just found two places, not too much pressure, just lightly in there, just to gently give it some correction, give it some guidance of where I want those branches going out. Coming out here, see, most of these are in a pretty good bowl shape. Now the other thing you could also do is sometimes you can even tie a string on there. So if I've got something shooting out too much vertical, and I want it to come in a bit, I could do that and train it to come in. But generally you're shooting for branches to go out. And being a young tree, there's not going to be that many yet where that will happen. But I could see, you know, down the road, if I had a tipped thing that was growing two that were close together but they're healthy, I might split those down the road. I like to notch the wood just so it has a little place to sit. So I went through with my saw and just gave each of these a little notch so the branch can sit in there and just helps hold that piece in place. One thing to notice here, and this is from a different apple tree in the yard, but apples and fruit buds, they only grow on the lateral branches. So the ones that are going straight up and down, you're not going to be getting apples on those. It's the lateral branches. So as you do a heading cut or a tipping cut on those, you're going to encourage more lateral growth, which is where those fruit buds will develop, whether it's there or there's one from this year. So I wanted to highlight this with this tree that's producing fruit. You can see the main stem here, at least this one, there's a couple of them on this one, but on this one you're noticing there's apples, but none of those apples grow on the main. In fact, they grow on the lateral, so it's all those little shoots that kick out. That's where those apples are popping out. So they grow on the lateral branches. The fruit buds shoot off of that main stem. So that's why you're aiming to, you don't want that thing just going straight up, and they're not going to grow any fruit off them up and down. You want those lateral branches that you're kicking out. And then for the third tip, it deals with the water and nutrients. So young tree, hopefully you've been doing this throughout the summer, but your tree is going to survive if it's getting water. And because it's young, those roots are not very well established yet, you really do need to keep this thing well watered at least once a week, give it a really good drenching all around it, and just continue those roots to encourage those roots to go and seek out that water that's deep or far away. Nutrients, it'll continue to go out there, but don't fertilize. You don't want to fertilize the tree at this point. Let the roots do the work of seeking out nutrients. I would keep a good compost mulch on top just to keep the ground moist and help it retain water in those hot summer days. But as you're heading towards the end of summer, keep this thing watered. The roots are still getting established. You might think you've got it now, it's all set. Give it a good first year of taking care of that, making sure it's getting that regular bit, and your tree should be healthy, and it'll be exciting to see what happens in year number 2. And just to show you a little bit on this Honeycrisp limb, so where the pink is, that's where I grafted. Let me show you some shots from last winter when I grafted that in there, and you can kind of see how this thing has continued to grow. But you can see here in the early stages where it's just a nub of wood that's basically shoved in there and put together and taped up, and then gradual growth. This thing is starting to take life. That's exciting. I know it's going to do all right, and then it just continues to shoot up. And you can see it's got some great life in there. I've already tipped it, but even with tipping it, I've got an extra 1.5 feet of new growth, and I cut off a good, probably about 9 inches to a foot off of there. And I'm just gonna let that branch really get healthy. Well, year 1, that's a wrap for this year's video. There will be future videos each year as we watch this thing grow and learn some lessons along the way. Hopefully this was helpful, and again, have a good life.